people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday. Ooh, my voice. August 27th, 2024. My name is Emma Vigeland in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Alex Sammon of Slate will be with us to talk about what he saw at a Zioness party at the DNC. Also on the program today, another day of massacres in Gaza. Israel kills at least 18, including 8 children. Israel and Hezbollah's fighting seems to have cooled. Russia attacked wide swaths of Ukraine with more than 200 missiles and drones yesterday, one of the largest since the war began. Michigan has denied RFK Jr.'s request to remove himself from the ballot, as the deadline has already passed.
Geniuses.
Jack Smith appeals Trump-appointed Judge Cannon's decision. Trump-appointed Judge Cannon's decision to dismiss the federal documents case. Democrats sue to block Georgia State Election Board's new anti-democracy pro-Trump election rules. Texas removes more than 1 million people from the voter rolls that they have deemed ineligible. The UAW calls for the Stellantis CEO to go after the company reneged on their deal to reopen an Illinois factory. In France, there are calls for impeachment after Macron refuses to name a prime minister from the left-wing coalition. We should have more on that tomorrow, by the way. The antitrust trial against Kroger's $25 billion acquisition of Albertsons kicked off yesterday. Kroger's legal arguments boil down to, well, you let Walmart do it, okay? Let us. Which is just, like, hilarious, because that was previous administrations. A Vanderbilt study finds that suburban and rural areas have higher gun violence rates than cities. We've been saying that for quite a while on this program. And lastly, in Canada, rail workers prepare a legal fight after the Canadian government imposed an end to their lockout. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It is a Newsday Tuesday. Yes, it is. So we will be getting to Alex Sammon in a bit. He's dispatched from the DNC. I guess it was. Was he victimized by the super spreader event that was the Democratic National Convention? Apparently, right?
Unconfirmed at this point.
It is crazy, and there's no push from the Biden administration right now to encourage people to get their COVID shots, because there's an updated booster right now, folks. Look into that.
Helps against long COVID too. I'm gonna get it.
Yep, me too. I've got to get on that and schedule a shot. I wish the Biden administration at least emphasized this in any way, because COVID deaths ticked up last week, is my understanding.
It'd be cool if he looked at this lame duck period as like a chance to just do whatever he wants, and it'd be nice if whatever he wants was let's lean into this COVID stuff that we've been downplaying for a while. Instead, it seems to be just help these arms shipments get out the door.
It was interesting at the DNC. They brought up COVID a good amount to highlight Trump as this negative force who talked about injecting bleach. So there is still political salience in reminding people about the chaos. It just seems like
the chaos being his rhetoric. That's really what they're judging on,
That's
which
what
was
they're
bad, of
yeah.
course, but you know.
Right. I think that overall, it seems like politically they just want to move on from it. And the country definitely doesn't like to think about COVID anymore, but you should, especially if you have comorbidities or people that you deal with that may be affected. Go get that updated booster shot.
And, you know, not to make the segment go on too long, but all these, even including Long Island, Nassau County, doing these anti-mask ordinances, just insanity.
Insanity.
Like, insane. And, like, I can't...
The model for what the Democrats want to do statewide, by the way, in New York State, is the Long Island strategy. They want to pull this blue state to the right.
Because it's anti-Semitic. Literally is like, it's making people feel unsafe in the protests.
Right.
That was their justification. But it is ridiculous that, I mean, and I can't heap enough disrespect at the sort of anti-mask, anti-vaxxers that RFK represents and their contribution to this moment right now. It's just horrible.
Aren't they the anti-censorship free speech guys? But now they are going to
that's a lie.
They're gonna back ordinances that tell you what kind of cloth you can or cannot wear on your face.
The Klan used to talk about free speech the same way all of these folks did in the 30s. Same with the Silver Legion anti-Semites in Minneapolis. I've just been reading about Hubert Humphrey taking on them, but they deploy free speech in the same way, which is to say, like, they hide behind it because actually talking about what they really want is really offensive to people.
So, Trump is in I guess news that's a little bit more fun. Trump is already, well, I guess this is the second round of him bitching about the debate. I mean, he is so afraid, and it's wonderful to watch him on the back foot. Trump has been now all of a sudden saying, I don't think I'm going to agree to the debate. I don't want to do it. Before he had said that he wasn't going to because of ABC. And now the campaign has a new excuse because apparently Kamala Harris very smartly doesn't want to use the same rules that Biden used the first time around in the debate, which was that the microphones for each candidate would be muted when the other one was speaking. We criticized that decision by the Biden administration, by the Biden campaign heavily at the time, because if you guys recall, in 2020, the debate where Trump had his biggest meltdown, where he was sniffling all the time and acting hysterical, was when he was on the defensive and he kept talking over Biden. And that was kind of the death knell for his 2020 ambitions. And so making him look crazy by having him interrupt her all the time, especially now that he's running against a black woman, that benefits Harris, no doubt. But I guess these were rules that Biden had already agreed to about the microphones being muted. And Harris is saying, hey, we should change those rules. And Trump is outraged about it, right? Or at least that's the excuse that they're giving. Because at the same time that's what the Trump campaign wants to emphasize to the public, like, oh, it's unfair on that front. Trump can't help himself but return to personal grievances and his complaints about the fake news over and over again, and bias and woe is me. This is what he had to say yesterday at a campaign stop in Virginia. He's asked by reporters about this, about why he's indicating that he may not want to do the debate with ABC on September 10th.
President Trump, would you want the microphones muted in the debate whenever you're not speaking?
We agreed to the same rules. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. I'd rather have it probably on, but the agreement was that it would be the same as it was last time. In that case, it was muted. I didn't like it the last time, but it worked out fine. I mean, ask Biden how it worked out. It was fine. And I think it should be the same. We agreed to the same rules. Same rules and same specifications. And I think that's probably what it should be.
He's not picking out rugs.
But they're trying to change it. The truth is they're trying to get out of it because she doesn't want to debate. She's not a good debater. She's not a smart person. She doesn't want to debate. Okay?
They're trying to get out of it. No, that's you, buddy. So, again, the campaign line wanted to be that they're changing the rules. This is unfair. It's the Harris campaign's problem. But Trump has to go into the personal there and say she's not a smart person. It was a really dumb idea to begin with, and this is Biden's fault, as many things are recently. Agreeing to that just made sense for a guy, I think, that seemingly maybe would have issues hearing, say, the moderator speak at the same time as Trump speaking, right? It was tailored to that situation. But even then, as I just said, nothing could have saved Biden's performance in that debate.
Yeah, they were trying to find like, here's where we put the gutters down in bowling, like any possible thing we can throw to save a guy who is clearly not competent to do what they're asking him to do.
Yeah, and so it makes sense that the Harris campaign wants to change course here. But every time that Trump complains about this, especially from his own mouth, Harris isn't going out there and talking about the microphone rules. This is all happening with the campaigns behind the scenes. But he's also sending out guys like Byron Donalds to argue for him. A representative from Florida here went on Fox Business yesterday and is, trying to make this Mike storyline work.
So will there be a debate to sort all this out for the undecided?
I do believe there's going to be a debate, but I would tell President Trump and his team to keep the same rules from the Joe Biden debate. And let me be very clear as to why. The reason why Kamala Harris wants to change the rules now to have open microphones is because she wants to interrupt Donald Trump. She wants to be able to create a spectacle out of this debate, which would prevent her from actually being forced to discuss public policy, discuss her positions in detail. She wants to create some sort of moment, some sort of YouTube spectacle that can be replayed so she can hide behind the debate as opposed to talking about the policies that impact the American people. She wants to be able to create this moment where she owns Donald Trump for 10 seconds. That's just ridiculous. It's not what matters in our country. Donald Trump has debated everybody from Hillary Clinton to Joe Biden, all points in between. He can definitely debate Kamala Harris, but it is in the interest of the American people that Kamala Harris is not allowed to make this debate a spectacle. It has to be about the issues facing America, because she has serious questions that she refuses to answer. And the way they're campaigning, the only way the American people will get a straight answer about her policy positions and the thought process behind them, and that's very important, the thought process behind them, is if she actually has a very clear debate with Donald Trump where both people have an opportunity to express themselves without being interrupted, whether it be by the moderators or by the opposing person. Kamala Harris wants a spectacle. She doesn't want to debate on issues. That's why she wants to change the rules.
Oh, yes. So this is the reframe. They want it to be that she's changing the rules. So they're putting this out there that this is what the Harris campaign is lobbying for.
She's going to bulldoze me.
I mean, okay. So I love
She's like
watching
Zion going down the lane.
This whiny little campaign just fall into just slip into the warm bath of the Hillary 2016 vibes here, okay? Yeah. Don't campaign too much in the swing states. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. I mean, use an algorithm to figure that stuff out. Just
complain about your opponent's manners.
Yeah, talk about how mean they are.
God is weird. That's
they're interrupting me. They're great. Oh, Trump doesn't want shots at me. Trump does not want to be interrupted. Trump does not want to be interrupted at the debate. Actually, I mean, it's really a beautiful blend of Biden 2020 and Hillary 2022 as well, where you got the age stuff. Trump's now, making the campaign into his own, like, kind of personal ambition for the presidency, or making that the sole focus as opposed to in 2016 where he's like, I'm going to give you health care, I'm going to end all the wars or whatever. He's running basically as a neocon. We played that yesterday with his Iran fear-mongering, again, shades of past failed campaigns, making it about foreign policy and like his own desire and selfishness in that way. It's just not a winning message.
You don't think the winning message for Trump is to tell the American people that he's being bullied away from talking policy by Kamala Harris?
I don't think has anyone ever heard about the boy who cried wolf? Like,
he is just whiny now. Like, you read his tweets, and it used to be funny, like, but even now when he tries to throw in his little insults, it's like you are writing like 1,200 words whining right now.
Yes.
No, he's really doing the equivalent of like the Luka Doncic, like red-faced, I got fouled and won't run back on defense.
He's trying to work the refs.
It is total ref work.
He's crying for mods. Mods, save me here. Where are the moderators? Where are the microphone muters?
They're calling me weird.
Harris put out.
If she calls him weird at the debate, he will lose his mind.
It's going to happen. Let's put up the statement that the Harris campaign put out there. I just sent it to you, Bradley. This was what they had to say in response to microphone Winegate. Their reaction: we have told ABC and other networks seeking to host a possible October debate that we believe both candidates' mics should be live throughout the full broadcast. Our understanding is that Trump's handlers prefer the muted microphone because they don't think their candidate can act presidential for 90 minutes on his own. We suspect Trump's team has not even told their boss about this dispute because it would be too embarrassing to admit. They don't think he can handle himself against Vice President Harris without the benefit of a mute button. What I like about this here is also that they're goading Trump into responding, because and agreeing honestly to their demands, because if it's portrayed as if his handlers think he can't hack it without the mute button, then perhaps he changes course on this front. He doesn't have the leverage here. He needs the debate is the reality. He is losing. Harris has gotten a 2 to 3 point convention bump in polling averages, and that's still rolling out as we speak. And before that, the momentum had already begun to swing in her way. And RFK not being able to get himself off the ballot in the key swing state of Michigan is significant. So we shall see.
Genius. Well, I mean, you didn't think to check that?
I know. He basically
too busy lifting weights.
Waited until he ran out of money. The worm was telling him just stay in a little bit longer and maybe you can get 5% and become a party on the national level. That was their aim. He's staying for that reason on the ballot in non-swing states, but
with spoilers like this, who needs dark horses?
Right. They're not sending their best.
What I find pretty incredible about the Donalds thing too is like Donalds is giving like his usual. That's like sort of how he talks rhetorically about basically any issue, but which makes it seem like he's saying something like very serious and calculating and like stern and discerning and shrewd for Trump to like why Kamala Harris is doing this. He's really, when you read the tea leaves though, he's basically just saying Kamala's gonna embarrass him and we can't have that. And if she gets a soundbite that is distributed widely over and over and over again for the next 2 months, like Trump is going to have a world historical meltdown that we as a party cannot come back from.
Yes.
Because I mean, it is the imagery there that will play a lowest common denominator, which is a younger black woman telling an old white bigot, say, shove it.
Yeah.
And that, like, regardless of any content that comes out on the longer form review of the debate, I think they're right that that's not a good look for Trump. No, there's no image that will come out of that where Trump looks good in a snapshot.
No, and you know, she in 2019, it was in 2019, but for the 2020 campaign, she tried that little girl was me thing to hit Biden, you know, before he selected her as VP, because there was a profile of Kamala Harris in the Washington Post this weekend about how she was one of the first kids in the school busing program to integrate the schools in Berkeley, which was voluntarily done in California in that area, as opposed to imposed in other areas of the country. And at the time, Biden was advocating for even a constitutional amendment to prevent school integration via busing. That was why she hit him on that in the debate. Now, you know, I maintain that I think, you know, Biden's racism was also a big part of why he was selected in 2008 by Obama to quell some of those fears. Like, that's the kind of guy he is, unfortunately. I think she's an improvement in that regard, but also that tactic outside of a Democratic primary where a lot of Democratic voters don't want to think about the vice president to the first black president as a racist who eulogized Strom Thurmond, but you go after the guy who is widely known to be extremely racist with that tactic, much more effective, and he's worried about that. And last thing on this, it's like, what are we doing here? Debates should not be like little segmented 1-minute statements where they can't interact with one another, just on like a fundamental level about what a debate should be. They should be forced to interact. They should be forced to crosstalk. That's how this thing works. I
would like a formal written debate segment where they, expend themselves at length and reply to each other's responses, maybe in the papers of record. But we got to play this up for television. So we accept this as like the number one like medium for truth, and it's absolutely ridiculous.
This is the television country. Are you thinking?
It's crazy. Neil Postman was right. That's all I'll say.
If we did written debates in newspapers, do you you know what the level of like turnout would be for the election? I feel like just like we elected the reality TV.
We could
guy
have
for
people. We
president.
could have people act them out afterwards. Maybe.
You volunteer?
No,
I'll do it. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
No,
I was thinking like Morgan Freeman and I don't know other people that are really good and has gravitas. But
there we go.
We need two people yelling at each other as to who wants to be more energy independent.
Yep.
That's what the country needs.
Yep.
It could be George Clooney versus John Voight, like reading the written.
Are the two
debate
most
out.
powerful celebrities in the country?
Patriots. The jackal is coming, and her name is Kamala Harris.
Okay, easy now. All right, guys, a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Alex Sammon.
Hey, folks, I'm sure you have read some of this, and you know that a lot of people are learning about all the benefits about fasting. Of course, there's weight loss, but there's mental and physical performance, gut health, and longevity. But one of the issues that people have with fasting is the whole not eating part. Well, that's exactly why Prolon was created. Introducing Prolon. It's a revolutionary plant-based nutrition program that nourishes the body while making cells believe they are fasting. It's researched and developed for decades at the University of Southern California Longevity Institute. It's backed by leading U.S. medical centers. Prolon helps promote healthy blood sugar, support cardiovascular health, and reduce abdominal fat. I did it. 5 days. I think it was in February. I was doing the show. Honestly, I was nervous because I fast, once a year for Yom Kippur, and I usually get like a throbbing headache by the time 2 o'clock comes around. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to do the show. But the thing about Prolon is it's like fasting, but with food. And, it's not a ton of food, but it's enough to keep you going. I felt energized during the whole thing. It starts with this 5-day Prolon program, snacks, soups, and beverages, all designed to keep your body in a fasting state. Comes in like 5 packages, so it's super easy. You don't have to think about it. It's really unlike anything you've ever experienced. Right now, Prolon is offering the Majority Report with Sam Seder listeners 15% off their 5-day nutrition program. Go to prolonlife.com/majority. That's PROLON life.com/majority for this special offer. Check it out. Put the link in the podcast and YouTube description. And now, back to Emma.
We are back, and we are joined by Alex Sammon, politics writer at Slate, who is with us, fighting through some of the a cold / potentially, I don't know what it is, but apparently the DNC was a super spreader event. So welcome home, Alex. How was it? Did you have fun?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's an interesting event. It's it's like nothing happens of consequence, but also, everything or everyone is there and, all these Democratic politicians. So it's like, it's both the most interesting and least interesting thing you can do. And then everyone got sick.
I was listening to Democracy Now! Last week, and I saw Juan Gonzalez made this point, which I hadn't put together, that like back in the 80s, there used to be different coalitions that would come on the floor with signs that represented, what they wanted to say at the convention or represent or what their interests were. And it's really been replaced by, there was those few moments where the anti-genocide protesters were drowned out by the We Love Joe or the Kamala signs. But it's like, there's this it's become extremely corporate. I've only been, I guess I didn't go to the 2016 convention, actually. I just reported on it from the outside. But yeah, that's what strikes me a little bit, is that it seems like it's become basically a 4-day long advertisement for the party exclusively. It was always that, right? But now it's more like that's what it's become, as opposed to say like, hey, this different kind of coalition of Democrat can speak, etc.
Right. Especially now, right? It's like the unity vibes are so high in the party, and it was just like a pep rally, basically. There's like only one faction that has any complaint about any policy position or anything else, and it's the ceasefire protesters and delegates, and even they didn't get their moment. So total pep rally. Lots of corporate sponsors also.
Right. And you mentioned there the ceasefire, the pro-Palestine, anti-genocide demonstrators, the uncommitted folks. Would you say that your observations at the Zionist Party showed an activated base? I mean, we'll get into that now. I guess people should read your piece in Slate. I went to a Zionist Democrats party at the DNC. What I saw made me think there's a policy shift coming, is the title of the piece. What was the mood in the Zionist DNC?
And can I just underline what Emma's saying? Zioness, like lioness.
Well, those were T-shirts that were handed out. I mean, it's called, I guess it was called something else, right? It was no, maybe I'm wrong.
That's the name of the group, Zioness. Yeah.
I'm so sorry, Matt. I assumed that was just like a sub tagline or like something for the T-shirt. No, that's what they call. Oh, yes.
No, that's the org. Yeah.
It's interesting because, sometimes white supremacists use a lion as a symbol for their mighty, magnitude, right? And you can draw some real comparisons between Zionism and white supremacy, but we don't need to go there right now. So was Zioness, was it a bitchin' time?
Yeah. So like the funny thing about the DNC, right, is there's all this programming all day long, and then there's all this, sort of like nightlife stuff. There are all these parties and so it's like two sides of the coin, right? There's the formal remarks during the day, and then the after hours stuff is also sort of important to get like a lay of the land and like, where things are at in terms of like, who's got the juice and who doesn't. And so like this group Zioness, I think it's actually a really interesting group. I don't go into too much detail of its backstory in the piece, but like it's sort of an AIPAC spinoff. It was like stood up in 2017 by the Lawfare Project, which is sort of a right-wing group. And one of the women, Ann Lewis, is an AIPAC person going back, years and years. And she was a Hillary Clinton advisor and stuff. It's been a pretty marginal group for a while, but it sort of was chartered at the same time as Democratic Majority for Israel. So it's sort of like part of the AIPAC strategy of like having a bunch of different orgs that they can sort of like stand up and sit down depending on how they want to spend in an election or whatever it is. So this group was like launching its action fund. So it was the first time that they're getting into political spending. Yeah, so you would think like, right, they obviously, AIPAC has spent a ton of money in this election cycle. They've been largely successful. Joe Biden has been utterly unwilling to accommodate anything other than the most sort of like AIPAC friendly position on Israel. So you would think it would be sort of like a triumphant moment, or at least like an ascendant feeling in the party. And it was like, obviously Zioness is the feminist version of AIPAC. So it was, progressive, pro-Zionist, pro-Kamala, I think was the slug for the party. But it wasn't that. So that's the whole thing. It was very hard to get on the list for this party because they were like, oh, we're so oversubscribed. Like the list is, is plus, overbooked, and like more than 500 people. Like they sent out an email being like, you can't bring plus ones. Like this thing is going to be jammed. And then I got there and it was like 35 people. It had promised to bring, they had promised that 2 senators and 7 members of Congress would be speaking at this party. Both the senators no-showed. 6 of the 7 members of Congress did not speak. And, supposedly 2 of them were in the room and didn't speak. I didn't see them. The big closer was Mondaire Jones, who's not even in Congress. So it was an interesting dynamic. It was not like the triumphant sort of atmosphere that you might think, given the sort of posture that I think AIPAC has had toward publicly in this election cycle.
So Mondaire Jones spoke. He's running for Congress again. You had an interesting interaction with Mondaire Jones at the end of this party. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So he was the big closer. And obviously he's had this massive political makeover. And he, when he came to Congress in 2020 was like the court reform, like the left-wing court reform guy, structural reforms. And now he's like, pro-Israel first and everything else is sort of second. And he's running in New York's 17th district. It's like an important flip for Democrats. They really want that seat back. It's like, it's Hudson Valley. It's pretty democratic. It should be an easy win. And he's running against Mike Lawler. Yeah, he gave this speech that was, it sort of invoked the defensiveness and defiance, I think, of the whole event, where they were like, he was like, it's not a contradiction to love Israel and be progressive. It doesn't not make sense to be progressive and also pro Zionism. Like,
right.
It was a lot of those. It was like, like, don't let the criticisms get you down. Like, there's no contradiction in terms of our position, and we love Israel, and like, we'll do whatever it takes to make sure that Netanyahu can, keep on keeping on. And like, I don't know, was it stirring? There weren't any people there to be stirred, but obviously I think that this is, he's also running against someone who is pretty close to AIPAC on the Republican side, and Mike Lawler. And I don't know. It's the political calculus there is interesting. I'll just say that.
Absolutely. Here's an image of the shirts that you took at the Zioness AF event. Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
Did you take one of those home?
Oh, you better believe it. Yeah, I got it in my room right now.
I mean, that's got to be at least just, I don't know, some sort of collector's item, even if it's extremely depraved.
It only works visually because when you say Zioness, it just sounds like someone saying Zionist.
Right. Or did you misspeak, or do you know what you're talking about? So, like, you mentioned that they advertised that there were going to be many more politicians speaking who did not. Who were some of the other politicians, at least in attendance, and some of your observations from that?
Yeah, so the only sitting member of Congress who was supposed to be there and actually showed up was Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and that was really funny because
of course
her speaking slot got nixed by the DNC on Monday night, so they kicked her off the program because they were running long or whatever, and she was one of the first casualties, which is honestly so funny because she's also a former chair of the DNC. Like, she's someone with like institutional standing, at least historically, and they scotched her from the program. So her like consolation prize was coming to this event and speaking at this event, and she gave like a, I don't like a 2 or 3 minute speech, and then she just bolted. Like, it was not, I don't think her heart was in it. She did show up and she did sort of say what you would expect her to say, but then she was out of there. She was not hanging around. And the only other member of Congress who actually showed up was Brad Schneider from Illinois. And he wasn't even on the program. He just showed up because he's a team player.
He's a huge Zionist.
Yeah,
he was just quoted in the Times of Israel, and they've been doing this like once a week. The Times of Israel, which is like a right-wing paper in Israel, will put out some article saying Kamala Harris won't change arms policy. Kamala Harris says this Democrat who talked to this aide. I mean, the Congress person who was quoted in that latest piece, which got some run, and I was trying to say, like, this is not somebody close to the team that can give you any kind of real assurances on this front, was that representative there. So that, I mean, I'm interested what the mood was. I mean, you talk about it in your piece, but it seems like, just based on numbers alone, there's a bit of deflation. Is there any even recognition of the Palestinian cause in an event like this, or like, does the word Palestinian even like come out of anybody's mouth?
Definitely not. So
okay.
That was not. There was some interesting, like, Van Jones was there to talk about how, like, the civil rights struggle and being pro-Israel are basically the same political project, which was very interesting. And which featured like this. I was surprised. I didn't get the exact quotes. I didn't put it in the piece, but it was just like, he had this thing where he was like, the Black community and the Jewish community did the civil rights movement because you can't count on like the Puerto Ricans and the Swiss to get stuff done, and that's the same thing with Israel or whatever. And it was just
could he? Malcolm, just look up what Malcolm X had to say about Zionism. And I mean, like, that is such a cynical bastardization of that for that kind of audience. But he runs wherever the money goes, I guess. That's his thing these days.
Yeah, it's just funny because it's like, imagine if it was reversed and he was at like a anti-Zionist sort of event, like such a categorically political anti-Zionist event, like CNN would have fired him in 19 seconds, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's sort of interesting. Yeah, the mood was funny because it was like, so Ilan Goldenberg, who's the Harris campaign's new Jewish community liaison, spoke there as well, and he wasn't on the program. But if you look through his record, like progressives are sort of happy about that choice,
He's
right?
okay.
Yeah. His track record is not so bad whatever. His track record is not so sort of conservative on Israel. It's a little more on the progressive side of things. So, the fact that he was there was interesting. It was like, I talked to someone who was like, he should have known better. He shouldn't have been there, which is interesting. At the same time, his remarks were sort of fascinating as well, because he was like, Kamala Harris, is very attuned to Jewish culture and a Jewish community. Like, her husband is Jewish, and they do, they've like done all these things at the White House, and they, they're going to continue to celebrate Jewish holidays and all this stuff. Which was interesting to me because it was not about Israel. It was about Jewishness, which, I thought was notable. It's funny to me too, because I think if you look through Harris's advisors on this stuff, you see that, like, especially on the foreign policy side, like, they're in the blob, but they're on the left edge of the blob, right? Like, they're not like, fire breathing progressives, but they're not Joe Biden. They're not Joe Biden's advisors.
That's what I've been saying. Yeah. I care about who her staff is more than I care about the rhetoric at this moment. In that same, even though we need policy concessions, but in terms of, like, if you want to forecast, tomorrow we're going to be having a guest on to talk about Phil Gordon and what her top advisor, national security advisor, who's expected to stay on in that role if she were to be president. He's currently the national security advisor to the vice president. And the study of this work that Michael Brennis did kind of comes to that same conclusion, where this is more of a return to Obama era, maybe foreign policy, at least as it relates to Israel, as opposed to giving them the farm. Taking a more even-handed approach, at least, is what he advocated for in his books. We would have to see if the infrastructure would be there for them to do that. But the fact that Ilan Goldenberg said just focused on Jewish identity at that event is interesting to me as well.
Yeah. And, like, I don't know, the speakers who talked to, who were pretty rah-rah. I mean, obviously, right, this is also, they were launching a political action fund. So it's like, the context there is important too. It was just a lot of, like, there was a lot of talking about the past tense about how much Joe Biden valued the Israel, the U.S.-Israel relationship, and, like, how great, and it's like, there's a reason they felt they even needed to have this event, right? Like, there's a reason that you feel like you need to launch a pro-Kamala, progressive, pro-Israel organization. And it's because you don't trust that your position is being, sort of like taken care of without it. And so, to me, it was interesting. It's one of those things where I think, obviously people are disappointed by the DNC programming, or, they felt coming out of that like there wasn't nearly enough said about the plight of the Palestinian people and everything else. And, but I think that, like, you go to these events and stuff and you feel, at least from the pro-Israel side, that there's concern from them. Like, they feel like something might be changing. And to me, that feels notable.
We had a viewer write in, number 13, Netanyahu was literally mentioned by name. Like, they were praising Netanyahu at this event, not even doing the liberal Zionist thing where they criticized Netanyahu, or...
I asked Brad Schneider about this. I don't remember them saying exactly praising Netanyahu by name, but after Brad Schneider spoke, I went up to him and I was like, surely you're concerned about the fact that, like, Netanyahu would prefer Trump to win, and this approach is just politically suicidal for Democrats, right? The embrace of Netanyahu, who has, totally contrary motivations, political motivations to Democratic success. Surely that's a concern to you. And he was like, he was like, I'm not gonna defend everything Israel has done, but
close to it.
That was like, which is sort of an interesting line. It's like, usually, I mean, you expect a certain deftness with these very obvious questions, and that one didn't get dispatched very, very, very easily, and I was surprised by that. But Yeah, I don't know. They weren't like, oh yeah, Netanyahu. But when I asked Schneider, he was like he certainly he didn't condemn him. He didn't say like, oh, obviously Netanyahu has gone too far and we need a better leadership team or whatever. Which some Democrats have done, but he also was not willing to. Yeah, it was sort of like he didn't really know what to do with it, and wasn't willing to do any sort of real criticism. So.
How about AIPAC? Was AIPAC at all discussed at the event?
No mention of AIPAC, which is, obviously this group is very much in the AIPAC extended universe, and it didn't come up. There wasn't actually even much talk about the campaign spending of this cycle, which was interesting. There wasn't, they didn't talk about AIPAC's impact on the primary cycle in 24. There was no real mention of it. It was just, it was more of like, celebrating the Biden Israel policy and sort of being like, it's going to continue. We're going to do our best to try. And that was sort of the main, the primary note in the whole thing.
All right. Well, Alex, people should read your piece on this. It's fascinating. It's called "I Went to a Zionist Democrats Party at the DNC. What I saw made me think there's a policy shift coming." I really appreciate your time today, and rest up. Feel better.
Thanks so much.
All right. With that, we'll turn to another story here on this news day, a really important one as it relates to voting rights. So Alex Burris of Bolt's Magazine had a piece that came out yesterday evening, I believe, that is really concerning. Voting rights activists in Nebraska had felt that they had made some headway in this regard, and Republicans in the government there basically nixed what was supposed to go into effect as it related to voting rights. The article is entitled "Nebraska Reverts to 19th Century Voting Restrictions, Clouding Rights for Thousands." And this is key heading into 2024 because, Omaha and that Nebraska 2nd District could be, in theory, the decisive vote for the election. It could break the 269-269 tie. Nebraska and Maine are the two states in the country that, in the Electoral College, basically don't have a winner-take-all system. So they split it into districts, right? And Nebraska's 2nd includes Omaha. It's been polling well for Biden and for Harris. I think I saw the latest average for 538 was like +8 for Harris at this moment. So there's Black people in that area, Latino people, Indigenous people, and those are the folks who are disproportionately blocked from registering now due to the Republican Party's actions in the state as it relates to this bill that was supposed to take effect on July 19th. It's called Legislative Bill 20, and it would have given 7,000 people in Nebraska, which is, not a very populated state, 7,000 people who had past felony convictions, the right to vote. And it was set to go in effect on July 19th. The voting rights groups had reserved ad space to get out the word that this was happening, that you could register if you qualified. But the Attorney General Mike Hilgers and the Secretary of State Bob Evnen, two Republicans, have just essentially refused to implement the law. More here from Bolts by Alex Burris. If we could scroll to the part that starts with "on July 17th, Bradley. On July 17th, less than 48 hours before LB 20 was to take effect, Hilgers issued an advisory opinion stating that the new law was unconstitutional. Okay, first of all, so that's just the Attorney General saying it's unconstitutional. These are the
my opinion.
Yep, yeah. This is the kind of stuff that look, they're gonna challenge it, but you're not supposed to be able to just do that universally. Unconstitutionality is determined through the judiciary, okay, and constitutionality. As I just said, on July 17th, less than 48 hours before LB 20 was to take effect, Hilders issued an advisory opinion saying that the new law was unconstitutional. But Hilders didn't stop there. He also declared unconstitutional a 2005 reform law ending lifetime disenfranchisement of anyone convicted of any felony.
Yeah, well, I'm at it.
So he goes back nearly 20 years in the past, 19 years into the past, to a 2005 law that Nebraska passed, Legislative Bill 58, which allowed Nebraskans to vote 2 years after completing their sentences, a waiting period that LB 20 was set to eliminate. So it's already been in effect that if you were convicted of a felony, it's a 2-year waiting period, and then you can register again. LB 20 was going to close that gap and in the present day, basically, allow for those 7,000 in that period to register to vote in the election. And this had gone through all the processes that it needed to, but just basically, universally, the Republicans that run the state just axed it. In his opinion, Hilders wrote that the State Board of Pardons, the three-member body composed of him, Evnen, and the Republican Governor Jim Pillen, so 3 Republicans, has sole discretion over whether to restore someone's voting rights. Right after Hilders issued his opinion, Evnen, the state's top election official, emailed county-level elections offices ordering that based on the AG's stance, we will not be implementing LB 20 and will no longer register individuals convicted of felonies. These moves by Hilders and Evnen shocked Nebraskans who have spent years pushing for voting rights restoration. The new law had overwhelmingly passed the Republican-controlled legislature earlier this year, and Nebraskans with past felonies have been registering to vote and actually voting for almost 20 years with little issue or outcry. For 2 guys working with one mind to come in and say, you know what, never mind, we're taking it back and also jumping in our political DeLorean and removing the law. It's outrageous, Aaron Pettis, a formerly incarcerated organizer and advocate in Omaha, tells Bolts. At 44, he'd been poised to vote in this fall for the first time in his life. When it was revoked, it was traumatic. I feel like I was back in prison. It felt like I was back in prison, he said.
I mean, partially.
Right. I mean, this is just a continuation of our insane prison industrial complex where we incarcerate the most people in the world per capita and raw figures. Yeah. And then after they leave, especially when oftentimes these felony convictions are related to drug offenses targeting poor, black, brown, indigenous, Latino communities, whatever, then when they come out, okay, there's already this 2-year waiting period that shouldn't be allowed. By the way, people in prison should be able to vote because their lives are still affected by this as well.
I agree.
But even when they come out, okay, there's this 2-year waiting period. Nebraska advocates get this through. But now it's not even that, like, the law that's been in effect for 19 years with the stroke of a pen, the Republican governor and his 2 cronies just basically say, no, we're not doing that anymore.
We got an election to win.
Unbelievable. The nonprofit Civic Nebraska and 3 disenfranchised plaintiffs represented by the state branch of the ACLU sued Envin and 2 county-level officials in late July seeking to compel them to allow citizens who have finished all terms of their convictions to register to vote in accordance with both the new reform law and the one that passed nearly 20 years ago. The state Supreme Court in early August agreed to hear the case and plans to hold oral arguments on Wednesday. We didn't have any problem finding plaintiffs because so many people had been excited to register to vote were so upset. This font is very small, and I'm not wearing my glasses. Adam Moorfield, a former state lawmaker who helped found Civic Nebraska, told Bolts it's a mess. So that's insane. I mean, we'll keep you abreast of the updates on that court case there, but it's just one thing to just the typical Republican malfeasance of like slow walking the law that had just taken effect from doing so. That's what you expect from them. But to go back and axe a democratically passed law in 2005 to retroactively do this kind of thing, I mean, it's just it's all projection when they talk about Democrats rigging the game.
Yeah, it's an assault on democracy. Ron DeSantis, the election that saw him elected governor in Florida, narrowly defeating Andrew Gillum, in the same election, that was a very tight result, not a tight result, overwhelmingly chosen by Floridans, was to re-enfranchise felons, which is a big population in Florida. And DeSantis and the GOP said, basically, you're going to have to go through a labyrinthine administrative process and pay a bunch of different fees, or it's going to be serious issue if you try to vote without clearing those hurdles. Just attack on democracy. And one final thing is, I don't like to be a spoil sport, but this is the kind of thing where it's like where people were saying maybe let's not lean so hard into calling Trump a felon thing. Like I think it's good to emphasize him breaking the law, but just leaning on that pejorative, I think, isn't really cultivating the type of atmosphere that we want in terms of democracy.
No, but I've got bad news for you about how Kamala Harris is going to run against him as a prosecutor. Yeah. And I from a macro view, I agree with you. It is, though, you mentioned Florida and that felon rule. Trump had to vote early. Did you know that he's already voted for himself? In part because of those rules, because he's a convicted felon.
Right, that's right.
And in Georgia, this was less than 24 hours ago. The DNC is suing, and the Democratic Party of Georgia, they're suing the Georgia State Election Board because basically this election board has implemented a bunch of rules that allow for county officials who, the Republicans have been working to stack these election offices, particularly in red states, with loyalists. It empowers county officials who want to refuse to certify the election results to continue to cause delays. Some of this has taken effect in Arizona here, but in Georgia, this is acute because Trump is currently in the middle of a RICO case in this state, being indicted for calling the Secretary of State Raffensperger and saying, I just need to find this amount of votes. I need to find these votes so he could win the state, because he lost in 2020 by around 10,000 votes. And so even with now he's by the way, he's been in a 4-year-long feud with Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, from this period. Last week, he tweeted something like, I love Brian Kemp. Might have something to do with this, because Kemp is also apparently saying, I'll hear the challenges to these rules. It'd be interesting to see how he rules. I'm sure he'll probably do it for Trump in the end, because partisanship wins at the end of the day. But they do,
Kemp?
Yeah. But I mean, it's not a foregone conclusion. I think because of how much he was put through by what happened in 2020.
And a lot of it's circumstantial. Like if Trump looks like a loser and it looks like his heart's barely in it, why would any Republican go above and beyond to help steal election for him? If it gets very close and very, very tight, the pressure on somebody like that becomes a lot more clear. But I'm not sure Trump's doing enough to put the pressure on him, frankly.
Right. So basically what has happened in Georgia is that Republicans have been stacking the election board. And then over the past few weeks, they've passed a lot of rules. This is how ProPublica talks about it here. The members of the Georgia State Election Board could not have been clearer. Back in May, 4 of them voted down a proposed rule that would have given county election boards a new way to delay or reject election results, which could throw the November vote count into chaos. You run counter to both the federal and state law, said Ed Lindsay, a Republican board member and attorney who practices election law, to the woman who proposed the rule. This rule violates federal law. It also violates state law, said Sarah Tyndall Ghazal, the board's lone Democrat. It's just not ready for prime time yet, said the board chairman, noting that it needed more work to ensure its legality. Even the lone board member supporting the rule, Janice Johnston, a retired obstetrician who had made unvalidated claims about falsified vote tallies in Fulton County, voted against it. The 5th board member did not vote. The board agreed that 2 members would work on improvements to the rule. 3 months later, a new draft of the rule came back for a vote. This time, it passed 3-2. How much did the rule change between drafts? A new review by ProPublica shows hardly at all. In fact, election law experts told ProPublica that the small changes made the rule even less compliant with existing law. The rule dramatically expands the authority of county officials overseeing the usually mundane task of certifying elections. The passage of it was enabled by nationally prominent election deniers and the Georgia legislature. And the board members who passed it were cheered on by former President Donald Trump. It comes at a time when Trump and his allies are already calling into question the fairness of the elections process and making preparations to contest the results, and as Trump slips behind Vice President Kamala Harris in swing state polls. So here's just a few more details on this change.
Yeah, just one quick note. Like,
Yeah.
I do think people need to look back at, and On the Media had a good coverage of the 2000 election. This is not hypothetical in this country. This is how elections are stolen. They've been stolen in this country. And this is like how they would be stolen in the future if they're not stolen this time. Yeah.
Yeah. And even if Trump does not win, right?
This will be tried again.
It's the blueprint. So basically, Raffensperger was not, after 2021, was removed as designated chair of the state election board. Instead, they gave themselves the power to appoint the chair unless they were out of session, in which case the governor could do it, though they could replace the chair once they were back in session. Another of the changes came this past May, after Lindsay, the Republican board member who had called the rule illegal, was pressured to resign. The Republican Speaker of the House replaced him with Janelle King, the former deputy state director of the Georgia Republican Party and a conservative media personality who has no experience in election administration and who had tweeted, "I have questions," about the results of the 2020 election.
And she just loves the Constitution.
She just loves it all up. With King, the board became stacked with a majority of members who had questioned the results of the 2020 election. In early August, Trump praised all three by naming them. He named them. Praised all three by name during an Atlanta rally, calling them pit bulls fighting for honesty, transparency, and victory. Meanwhile, the proponents of the rule, including Bridget Thorne, a Republican Fulton County commissioner who calls herself the rule's originator, decided to resubmit it. Thorne told ProPublica that claims of the rule's illegality were an attempt to scare her. "I went and talked to lawmakers," she said, "and they didn't see anything wrong with the rules." Thorne said she got advice and support on the revised rule from Hans von Spakovsky, a Heritage Foundation lawyer who led efforts for stricter voting laws nationwide for decades. Ken Cucciolini, a former Virginia Attorney General and the chairman of the Election Transportation Initiative, a group advocating for Republican priorities. Transparency Initiative, a group advocating for Republican priorities in election law. So basically, she consulted with a bunch of Republican.
And just to give a little context on Ken Cuccinelli, he was also one of the former DHS leaders that was found to have not been rightfully appointed. He's a big-time fascist and has run for many offices in Virginia. And Cleta Mitchell, the head of the Election Integrity Network, she used to be a partner at Jones Day at a law firm, which was representing Trump in a number of these cases to try and overturn the election.
Interesting. Did you say Janelle King, was it?
Yes.
She's married, Black Republican, married to another Black Republican, Kelvin King, who lost to, I believe, Herschel Walker in the primary. So it's a nice little political family they got going on down there.
So these are the efforts that Republicans are trying to pursue ahead of the election. This is just something to really keep in mind. Arizona, we already probably have an indication based on the rules that they've passed that we won't get the results for like days because of their kind of Byzantine process that they've implemented to prevent the voter fraud that never happened. And look, I'm okay with recounting, right? But not as some sort of like matter of rule. It's more just like if it is within a certain threshold of like statistical probability that there could be some errors, right? Like recounts, I think, are good, but not a recount by default that's also put in the hands of Republican operatives.
Well, no, but it's not just that they count them so thoroughly. It's that they say, "Oh, we need to really recount this," but then actually a deadline comes and we need to make a decision, like happened in 2000.
2000, right?
And so
or
it's
like,
all of a sudden an unelected body making the decision on it.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah, like the hanging Chad stuff. I mean,
Yep.
What irregularities can we find in these ballots, etc.? So, something to really keep in mind, folks. With that said, we're going to wrap up the first hour of this program and head into the fun half, where we will take your calls and read your IMs. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Ben Burgess tonight talking about his piece on Naomi Klein, which I'm about to read, but I'm excited to talk to Ben about it. Also be talking about this landlord stuff. Interesting audio found by Democracy Now! Maybe we can play it here about some guys saying, yeah, this rise in rep prices that we're seeing, it's us, baby. And I don't know that that's necessarily true. Like, part of me thinks that a focus on AI with regards to landlords is sort of like focusing on AI with regards to the IDF. Like, I don't trust them whether they have AI or not, but I will take any opportunity to agitate against them, and I think it's a good thing. So, and I also think Real Page is driving up rents.
Yeah.
But so check that out tonight, patreon.com/leftreckoning.
Yesterday on ESPN, Bradley and I talked a bit of fantasy. We also talked about
like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, close. They're both I don't know, like things I've geeked out about in the past. So this one's just in the present. We talked about players that I like, rules that I usually abide by in fantasy football drafts, that kind of thing. The
one time I won my fantasy league, I drafted two great tight ends, Jimmy Graham and the guy from the Patriots that murdered somebody.
Oh, Aaron Hernandez.
And I totally destroyed my entire league because I had them the entire season.
That is those Aaron Hernandez seasons too. Like, that was with Gronk, who's probably the best tight end of all time. Like, you know, in terms of his blocking ability and his receiving ability, but. When they were both on the field, like, that revolutionized. This is why Belichick still doesn't get enough credit. Like, that was he invented essentially the slot receiver position of, like, the little white guy going over the middle, at least in the Patriots version of it. And then the two tight end sets where those guys were such receiving threats that they had the multiple options of block. They didn't know if they were going to pass or run, right? So It gave Brady so many options. Yeah, those guys were freaks. And Jimmy Graham, he was a former basketball player who caught every touchdown.
BD Zav, Jimmy Graham was terrible. Well, then I won my fantasy league with a terrible tight end. So
Jimmy Graham had a few years of dominance in New Orleans. Like, he didn't have the success that he wanted to after he left, or he was traded to Seattle and then bounced around the league. But
I wasn't playing fantasy at that time. So.
Sam is my Pookie says Travis Kelce is the GOAT. Emma, Travis Kelce is the greatest pass catching tight end of all time. Travis Kelce does not block. You know, I love Travis Kelce as a player, but I just think that, like, sometimes blocking is key for the tight end position. And Gronk, you know, despite being a big idiot, and I hate seeing him as a broadcaster, for example, that people should go watch those old highlights. It's like another kind of human being. Anyway, 64625.
Sorry. Can I plug the Muhammad's fundraiser?
Yes, I'm so sorry. Yes.
Oh no, that's okay. No. I also just wanted to do it because I have the videos ready now.
Yes. Okay. So we mentioned this yesterday. Sorry, I got into sports. It's so meaningless, obviously, compared to this. We have a GoFundMe here. People might remember Muhammad Al-Dagma. We've previously promoted a GoFundMe that he organized, which was successful in getting many members of his family over the Egyptian border, including his niece, who you can see photographed there in the middle, who has Down syndrome. Some of the men stayed behind in Gaza to continue to use those funds to feed people. One of them was killed by Israel. But they're still working to feed the people of Gaza, and this is a second fundraiser for that effort. You can find it in the description. Right up at the top, we'll put it. So if you have any extra money and you'd like to donate to this cause, Gaza Bakery, feeding displaced families. We have some footage of those efforts if you don't mind pulling that up, Bradley.
And while you're doing that, I mean, October 28th, 2023, The Guardian, airstrikes on Gaza bakeries add to catastrophic food shortages. That was October 28th, 2023.
Yep.
Al Jazeera, Gaza bakeries targeted and destroyed by Israeli air attacks. That was November 2nd, 2023. It's not gotten better since then, obviously.
Here's some of the footage of the food distribution. see. And then there's the kids on the beach is what I was. Yeah, here we go. This was the food distribution piece.
It's hell.
There's some. We just have a little bit more short footage here. This is the distribution. Yeah.
القدس وعكا نحن إلى يافا.
That was a photo of a kid saying thank you. And then this is on the beach. By the way, Israel was just bombing here 2 days ago.
العمر يوم فلتحيا مخلدا ذكرى سعيدة.
So that's where your donations would be going. So if you can just share it, even if you don't have the money, if you could share it to family or friends or on social media, it's a big help. There are people starving to death, so and you can just see how they've
to correct you, but being starved to death by Israel.
Yeah.
And as you can see in some of the first footage we showed, it's very chaotic. Everyone there is clearly very desperate for sustenance, very desperate for safety. These are people who are lost not by their own volition. They're lost because Israel has made it so that they are lost.
Yeah.
And so
that is a intentional product. The conditions those people are an intentional product toward an end, which is for those people to give up hope about living in Gaza.
Yep.
And that's the real anti-terrorism being conducted in that. And anybody that is unclear about that is lying about an active Holocaust to you.
646-257-3920. We will talk more, of course, about Gaza in the not fun part of the fun half, but that's what we will promise you. Basically, is every day the show tries to make sure that we're giving you an update and making it clear what our tax dollars are doing. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Okay, Emma, please.
Well, I feel that my voice is sorely lacking on the majority report.
Wait, look, Sam is unpopular.
I do deserve a vacation at Disney World. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Emma to the show.
It is Thursday.
I think you need to take over for Sam.
Yes, please.
No. I'm gonna pause you right there.
Wait, what?
You can't encourage Emma to live like this. And I'll tell you why. So was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
What?
Tour, sushi, and poker.
Tim's upset.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Was offered a tour, sushi, and
that's what we call it in the biz.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Right.
Tour, sushi, and poker.
We're gonna get demonetized.
I just think that what you did to Tim Pool was mean.
Free speech.
That's not what we're about here. Look at how sad he's become now. You shouldn't even talk about it because I think you're responsible.
I probably am in a certain way, but let's get to the meltdown here.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Oh my God.
Tour,
wow.
Sushi.
I'm sorry, I'm losing my fucking mind.
So was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Logic.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Boy. Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid.
Had this debate 7,000 times.
A little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour. I'm losing my fucking mind.
Some people just don't understand.
So I'm not trying to be a dick right now, but like,
I absolutely think the U.S. should be providing me with a wife and kids.
That's not what we're talking about here.
Okay, all right. It's not a fun job. Twerk? That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. Willy Wonka twerk? That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. What's that offered to twerk? That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. That's twerk a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. What's that offered to twerk?
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Rogan has done it again.
That offered to twerk? That's a real thing. That's poker with the boys. I think he might be blowing it out of proportion. Real thing. That's poker with the boys. That offered to twerk? That's a real thing. That's poker. Let's go, Joey. Twerk? Sushi and poker with the boys.
Take it easy, Glenn.
Twerk? Sushi and poker.
Things have really gotten out of hand.
Sushi and poker with the boys.
Delusional.
Twerk?
Deluded.
Sushi.
You don't have a clue as to what's going on. Live YouTube.
Sam has like the weight of the world on his shoulders.
Poggers.
Sam doesn't want to do this show anymore.
Do it anymore.
It was so much easier when the Majority Report was just you. You were happy.
Let's change the subject.
Right.
Rangers and Knicks are doing great.
Now shut up. I don't want people saying reckless things on your boot. Are you against that?
That's a tougher question I have an answer to.
Incredible theme song.
Hi, Bumbler.
Emma Vigeland, absolutely one of my favorite people. Actually, not just in the game, like, period.
We are back. It is the fun half. We'll open up the phone line soon, but let's just get to this here. So, you see things on social media of the horror of the genocide in Gaza that Israel is committing with our tax dollars. And, you see things, of course, that we can't show on this program, like beheaded babies because of, like, say, bombs just exploding their bodies into pieces.
Yeah, and there's some debate about how much that's healthy. I imagine it's not healthy to look at that stuff. But I also think it's better that this stuff is able to be exposed than previously previous times, because we should know what's happening and what Israel is doing to Palestinians.
And I don't say this to make a naive point, but I think I've spoken about this with you guys before, but I think there are sometimes people when I talk about work or whatever, and they're like, oh my God, like, how do you like consume so much news every day and all these things going on? And to me, it's like, I try to decenter myself because, like, as much as it's hard to consume this stuff, it is much more difficult for the people experiencing the things that we're covering. So, like, this is, I think, as much as it might be painful to do so, even for some traumatic to do so, triggering to do so, I think it is important to decenter myself in it and also realize that it's very important to bear witness regardless.
And it pales compared to the actual trauma, which is what this little girl's going through, for instance.
Yeah. So Al Jazeera put this out. This is Sama Tabil. She's 8 years old, and she has lost her hair out of fear of being killed. And this is her talking about that. I'll read over the Israelis from the hospital while we were sleeping bombed the second floor of the hospital. Suddenly, 2 days later, my hair started falling and I ended up like this. She's 8 years old. She suffered a near-death experience. And she believes she lost her hair due to extreme stress caused by shelling and gunfire. I lost my hair out of fear. This is how I looked before the war. If you could just go back for a sec. Even before this. I lost my hair out of fear. Yeah. This is how I looked before the war. This is what my hair looked like. My hair was long and I used to style it and go out to play with the girls. Do you see how pretty I was? So, yeah, anxiety, fear and depression, some of the trauma, of course. There are 1.2 million children in need of mental health and sociological or psychosocial support. Okay, so...
And Al Jazeera, of course, says that started before October 7th, too.
You think, like, there's just these little things that hit you when you think about it, right? Like, little girls love to braid each other's hair.
A dad going to get birth certificates.
Here is, on the other side of the fence, footage of the Israeli soldier accused of participating in gang rape at the Said Teman prison camp. One of the people accused of potentially raping that Palestinian prisoner to death. There have also been accusations via Human Rights Watch that corroborate these accounts, including